And when we can walk together with others, it can be a game changer. That has been my experience. And there is a path forward where once maybe we felt resigned to a struggle that would last the rest of our lives this side of heaven, there is a path forward walking with others. And I personally am experiencing a freedom today that a number of years ago I thought was not possible.
The Mission Matters podcast is a partnership between 1615 and Missio Nexus, who have a shared passion to mobilize the people of God to be a part of His mission.
Well, hello and welcome once again to the Mission Matters podcast. I am Matthew Ellison, and you know what I'm going to say. I am joined by my good friend and co-host, Ted Esler. Ted, how's it going?
It's going great today.
I saw a friend of mine recently at the gym, and he said that. He goes, Matthew Ellison, my good friend Ted Esler. It stuck in his head, so it's really good. Well, today we're talking with Dennis Martin, a veteran missionary who is dedicated to breaking the silence around sexual brokenness in the church and on the mission field. As the head of the Sexual Wholeness Initiative, he's helping global leaders find freedom and integrity in their most private lives. We are thrilled to have him join us for this very important conversation today. Dennis, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
Well, I've had the joy of working a little bit with Dennis as we've made opportunities in this area possible at various Missio Nexus events and whatnot. And so I really just have a lot of respect for what's gone on here and Dennis himself. But Dennis, give us a little background just on the topic of sexual wholeness generally. We'll get more into more specifically what you're doing, but particularly as it relates to missionaries and missionary agencies.
Yeah. Well, I think traditionally, as probably has often been true in our Western churches, sexuality is something that we've always found difficulty in getting around to talking about. And for those of us that are in ministry full-time, myself included, if there is not a safe place, if I am alone, if I am not sure, for instance, and this is a part of my story, that I'm struggling with pornography to whatever extent while a missionary in France, what are going to be the ramifications? And the uncertainty surrounding that question, or the history, maybe not just with my organization, but in the church at large, will probably keep me from coming forward and receiving help, even with a colleague, if it's not a leader of my mission organization. Having swum in these waters for a while now, my perspective is the individualism, perhaps, in our American culture. The shame that's often attached with not being able to overcome sexual sin by myself is something that just comes to the forefront in my mind as, my goodness, God, Jesus, if you walk the earth today, you would be wading into these waters with us appropriately. You would be interacting with us. And our silence around this has led to the enemy, our adversary, having a heyday with human sexuality. And there is another path forward. I've experienced it. Mission agencies are considering transforming their culture to proactively saying that this is safe to talk about, and rather than part ways with you because it's the area of sexuality, we will consider working towards restoration and healing. I think there's just a way forward that is significantly different than what many of us have experienced in the past. Yeah.
Dennis, do we have any idea the extent to which sexual challenges are affecting and impacting our missionary force?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll share some just broad statistics. They don't necessarily apply to simply those in ministry, but the most recent statistics, and let me preface it by saying this conversation often begins with pornography because it's the most prolific and it touches so many. But it includes LGBT realities. It'll include, and I always say this cautiously, abuse as well, victims of abuse. But the statistics of pornography say that 70% of men and 40% of women will wrestle with pornography. We describe pornography now not as a man's problem, but a human problem. And I'm glad that we are able to do that we're doing that now. For a long time, I hadn't seen any statistics on abuse. And recently, the CDC had some statistics that I covered that says over half of women and as many as a third of men have experienced sexual violence, including physical contact, at some point in their lives. Now, how does that translate to the ministry? We can hope that the statistics are better, but like a colleague of mine once recently said in a group of missionaries, he said, if by some miracle we're all in the 30% in this room, to point out and underline, this touches us. And when we can walk together with others, it can be a game changer. That has been my experience. And there is a path forward where once maybe we felt resigned to a struggle that would last the rest of our lives this side of heaven, there is a path forward walking with others. And I personally am experiencing a freedom today that a number of years ago I thought was not possible. So there are ways to walk together. Let me read you a quote, though, to specifically talk to one of those. Sam Black works with Covenant Eyes, and he wrote a book called The Healing Church. And he says this: a few years ago, I was invited to speak at a major conference for missionaries of multiple denominations. Throughout the conference, I engaged one counselor after another who described a common theme. Pornography use is a common issue among missionary ranks. Counselors described pulling back the layers and counseling men and women about marital strife, depression, burnout, and other issues, and would regularly find pornography use as a part of the equation. And maybe something
that very well could have been the Missio Nexus conference, Dennis, because he's spoken at our event.
He's been there. Yeah. So,
sorry to interrupt you there. But
no. I wondered that myself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this probably goes without saying for many of us, especially that have lived cross-culturally as missionaries. But I think it highlights what is our reality when we leave home culture and home language and go to a foreign culture and a foreign language. Tony Burdenkircher is a licensed marriage and family therapist and some other things behind his name that I'm not familiar with. He says this: those of us living and working overseas in a cross-cultural context are not immune. Separated from important community and relationship resources, plunged night and day into a new and taxing world, and working for the good news against seen and unseen forces bring up all sorts of stressors and fears. So
I would be curious to know, what's a typical response? Let's say a mission agency has never been exposed to the kind of things you teach,
right?
The Sexual Wholeness Initiative. What's been the traditional or typical response going on at organizations when they find a missionary struggling with sexual issues, pornography or something else?
The most common, not the exclusive, but the most common response I hear is, we know that this is an issue and we know that we need to do something. And in the next breath, and it's so overwhelming, we don't know what to do. And then when they hear of a working model that other mission agencies, collaboratively, several mission agencies have worked on and come up with this working model that can be easily transferable, documents, rollout videos, and they have freedom to tweak it and make it their own. It's not going to look the same in every mission agency. And they say, oh my goodness, other mission agencies are doing something, and it's a launching pad, right? If we all are in our own corners and trying to reinvent the wheel in an area that have no experience in, it is overwhelming. We probably won't get around to it. But the working model has, I think, been a lifeline. And honestly, my hope would be that every single mission agency, nonprofits, even ways that this could impact the church. That's a little bit of a different story, though, as to how to do that. But that everyone would at least be aware of something like this, be able to take a look at it, and then consider, is this for us or not? For some, it's not going to be. There's some heavy questions there, like, do we have the resources to walk alongside and work towards restoration and healing within our organization? Are we lowering the bar by not separating ourselves from our colleagues that are maybe struggling in some way or another? And these are all legitimate questions, but I think we can interact with them.
So Dennis, you talk about this model. I wonder if you couldn't describe for our listeners what the pathway, I realize it's probably different case by case, but is there a general pathway towards freedom and restoration that this program uses?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. First and foremost, it is, how are we going to create an organizational culture of grace? Now, many will say, hopefully we already have a culture of grace. It's fundamental to our Christian walk and belief. But how safe is it for my members? If I were to survey the members of my organization, how safe is it? So can we say, as an organization, we are going to proactively come alongside our members and work towards restoration and healing? We're going to aim at being restorative, not punitive. And we're going to demonstrate that not with just our words, but with a standard of conduct policy that can show very specifically how we will come alongside in very concrete ways, even with a restoration plan over a long period of time when it's a more difficult issue. So that's fundamental. It means breaking the silence, talking about it, whether it's member care or, I would suggest, executive leadership. The president of our organization champions this message, and so we hear our president saying, "This is a safe place," and so forth. Then we have a goal that none of us would walk alone. Every single person, not even the person that says, "I don't have a presenting struggle at the moment in the area of sexuality," there's still an opportunity for them to walk with others and to not be alone. That can be with people within inside the organization, outside of the organization. It would be up to every mission organization, I think, to determine how they want to proceed. And then if we ask leaders to play a role in a pastoral coming alongside way, let's equip those leaders in this area. There are certain things to say and certain things not to say to both the one who is struggling and a spouse. Traditionally, spouses have not gotten the attention that they also very much need. So training leaders, a restoration guidelines to consider that could be used by an organization, if so. And all of that is turning our eyes inward for the health of our organization. And then we see that as a healthy platform. And then as we turn our eyes outward, obviously in ministry, to ask ourselves the question, how could we include human sexuality in our discipleship efforts to others as well? Because there's a broken world out there that doesn't get to talk about it a lot sometimes either. Yeah. So those are the five components of the working model. So
Dennis,
there's documents.
I'm sorry. It's been my experience that when a missionary steps forward with these kind of issues, it's the first step out the door.
Has that been your experience? Yeah.
Well, in organizations I've observed,
Yeah.
basically it's the first step toward it's usually not like you're fired, but it's okay, we're going to put you in a process, but rarely are these people restored. Are you seeing organizations that are really able to change that dynamic and bring some real restoration?
Yes, I am. And that's really interesting, Ted, to hear you say that. I honestly don't know. And I wonder, what's the majority camp right now? Those that do continue to show you the door, or not. And I would like to think that the momentum is shifting, but I honestly don't know how many are still doing that. But I'll just give you a couple quotes from two missions that I am working with. The heart of SWI that we really love is the approach from a sense of vulnerability and accompaniment, rather than an imposition of rules or guidelines surrounding sexual wholeness. It's very invitational. And I love that invitational word. And then a second one, what SWI has done for us is given us the resources. It's given us a model that we see value in. It's given us mentorship and methodology that has become a real springboard, a real catalyst for us to talk, to plan, to have open dialogue. So maybe it's because the ones that I interact with are the ones that their curiosity is piqued by the Sexual Wholeness Initiative. But I'm really encouraged with the conversations that we do have. I think, in the past we operated in one way. Culture was different. Pornography was not so easily accessible. LGBT realities weren't so present. And so we were comfortable and had a culture of navigating in one fashion. Unfortunately, we live in a different day and age. And so I think our approach probably needs to be different without lowering the standards of Scripture and of our holy God, but to come alongside one another. As long as we continue to remain isolated and alone, people are going to struggle and not get the help that they need. By doing this, there's some opportunity for community in Jesus's church that I think can be phenomenal and can change things drastically. It's not going to happen overnight. I doubt if it's going to happen in my lifetime. But this is worth diving into and asking the Lord to lead us forward in humility. Yeah.
Dennis, I wonder if you have a story or two of hope that you can share as you've helped these organizations develop this Sexual Wholeness Initiative. It'd be great to hear some real life stuff.
Right, some real life stuff. One organization has walked with 63 different people and or couples through a restoration procedure. And the vast majority of them have been successful. Not all. Okay. I'll have a conversation on a phone with someone who reaches out to me and says, I'm looking to walk alongside someone. I'm not comfortable with where I am at now. And we'll have a conversation, and there will be talk about what accountability relationship, but the word accountability has gotten some negative baggage for some. So we've renamed it allies. And in my ally, it's more about accessibility than accountability. My allies, we're available to each other 24/7. A lot of that's through texting. Over time, as it has become safer and even safer in these relationships, we reach out proactively to one another. If my wife's traveling, I'm going to proactively let my allies know. And if I'm feeling somewhat vulnerable at the moment, I might say, I will check in with you on a daily basis. You don't have to check in with me. I'm going to send you a text on a daily basis to say things are going well today. And if they don't hear from me, then they'll reach out. I can think of another couple who the husband, missionary couple, and has been struggling with pornography, and his wife is bravely trying to be supportive and forgiving. But until they talked to me in a safe debriefing setting, the two of them had not shared their story with anyone else, inside or outside of their organization. That just breaks my heart, because that's hard. That's hard. And I could get into some nitty gritty with how a wife might react. Let me just say, more sex is not the solution to fighting pornography. And we've used that in the past, but it's not currently. A dear couple, and just coming alongside them now, and they're talking about helping them forward and getting connected and not being alone. So, honestly, in our organization, we've been talking about it since 2018. There is still room for growth, most definitely, but I think the fact that we've been talking about it now for almost 8 years, on a regular basis, demonstrates this is something we talk about. It's not a program that just came and eventually went away. This is changing our culture. It is safe to do so. And we're going to take a chapel in a few weeks and have 4 of us, 2 men and 2 women, share our stories, not necessarily about sexual brokenness only, but share our stories of our allies, our accountability partners, those that we have in our lives that we can say anything to and demonstrate how much stronger we are because we have people like that in our lives, and then maybe practically what it looks like, how it fleshes itself out in the day-to-day. So,
Dennis, we have mission pastors that listen to our show. I'd be curious, anything you would say to mission pastors about this issue?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, first of all, I'd love to have a conversation if they're interested. If they are intrigued by the idea of an SWI initiative, they could reach out to their mission organization, and perhaps as a local church, they are the sending organization. But have that conversation. How are we proactively coming alongside? If our members, our missionaries, if we guess that maybe our missionaries, maybe our pastors, maybe those in full-time ministry are touched by this as well. How could we start a conversation that might impact a mission organization? I would reach out and have that conversation. And if they're really interested, let's think of a scenario where a local church has perhaps a missionary that grew up in their church and they sent them and they have a strong tie with them. And so maybe a first disclosure, if you will, of a sexual temptation or struggle comes to light to the missions pastor at the local church. There are guidelines in some of this as to what to say, what not to say, how to come alongside. For instance, I'll just share this briefly if it whets anybody's appetite, because many of us have never been in situations before. How do we handle that? So let's for the one who is struggling, let's say there's a conversation with a missions pastor. The good things to say would be, I'm glad you shared. It took a lot of courage. You're not defined by this struggle. We don't shoot our wounded. We help them. And maybe some things or what to say to a spouse might be, I'm so sorry. This is not about you. God not only God will help you, but we will help both of you. What do you need from me right now? And things not to say to a spouse are, this is a marital problem. What you need is marriage counseling. Have you forgiven him or her? And we've got to keep this quiet to protect his or her reputation or the ministry's or God's. So some practical helps in some of these resources that are a part of the working model.
Well, Dennis, I really appreciate the work you're doing. It is so needed today. I love the language, the invitational, the ally. These things are so important, not walking alone.
Mm-hmm.
As you were talking, I was reminded of the story of Saint Augustine. He was plagued by lust, and he couldn't overcome it. And he writes about this in his book Confessions, but he was beating his forehead with his fists. He couldn't overcome it as much as he tried. And he talks about the joy of the Lord is what freed him from bondage to the flesh. He talks about actually people that he walked with, similar, but I think it was Matthew Henry who said, the joy of the Lord arms us against the assaults of our spiritual enemies and puts our mouths out of taste for the pleasures with which the tempter baits his hooks.
Yeah.
And I think of those, I think of brothers in my life who have been my allies, and, they say, where are you getting your joy from? And, Jesus is a superior pleasure, Anyway, I just am so thankful for the work that you're doing and the ministry that you have.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And as my brothers, thank you for what you're doing. And as you have opportunity, may you as brothers come alongside other brothers and we all be stronger for it. There, 10, 20, well, when was, 20, 30 years ago when I was on the mission field, and what was the turning point for me was walking with others and not walking alone.
Yeah.
Before that happened, I always had a tender heart towards the Lord. So why in the world couldn't I overcome the pool of pornography? Walking with another person over time was the game changer. So I would naturally, over time, at a missions conference, intermission conference, it was usually in Europe where we were located, a conversation, something might lead to just sharing a little bit. And way back then, more time and time again, a man would say, "You struggle with that too? I've never talked to anybody about that." I'm not sure that's as much the reality nowadays, but for those of us who are older, it still very well may be. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Dennis, thank you so much. And it's been a joy to see this effort grow over the last few years. In the show notes, we'll make sure to put some information how people can follow up if they want more information. I just want to say thank you for your influence in the missions community. It's an important issue, and so glad you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity. And my hope would be that the word would spread even more. I'd love to have conversations with anyone and everybody in every mission organization and beyond. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks.
Thanks, Matthew.
Before you go, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. The Mission Matters podcast is a partnership of 1615 and Missio Nexus. Check out 1615.org and missionexus.org for more resources on the mission of God and the matters of the mission. The Mission Matters podcast is hosted by Matthew Ellison, president of 1615, and Ted Esler, president of Missio Nexus.